Tian Nanjun remembered that Zhao Wangqing was younger than him. Considering she was not yet 50, why did she suddenly pass away? And he hadn't seen Zhao Wangqing for 28 years. Why would she leave her belongings to him after her death? On the New Year's Day of 2012, it coincided with Laba Festival. Old Zhao said they should have a family banquet for this rare festival these few years. His words had Tian Nanjun spending her entire morning in the produce market. She bought meats and wines, compared prices among different vendors, and filled up 2 big cloth bags with produce and meat. At this moment, old Zhao, who was smoking at the entrance of the market, was fined 50 yuans for littering cigarette butts. Old Zhao was in a bad mood. He thought the arbitrary loss of 50 yuans was because Tian Nanjun dawdled too much when buying groceries. He glanced at his wife, who was bent over under the weight of the produce and meat, picked up the mutton at his feet, and stepped into the snow under the umbrella alone. The snow was falling heavily. Tian Nanjun chased after old Zhao, hoping to get under the umbrella to avoid a bad headache. No matter how quickly she went, old Zhao always walked faster. She became impatient. Old Zhao, tilt the umbrella towards me. Old Zhao was still thinking about the lost 50 yuans and said impatiently, "Why are you being so delicate? Stay still. Are you more precious than the mutton?" He turned the corner more hurriedly. Tian Nanjun stopped inside. It took the heat in her mouth turning into slowly drifting white smoke for her to snap out of this harsh criticism that she should be accustomed to. When she was approaching the residential area, she faintly heard someone calling her, "Teacher Tian." Tian Nanjun looked around but didn't see the source of the sound. She was about to continue walking home when a motorcycle with a dark green package stopped in front of her. The young man's face, red from the cold, was smiling. "Teacher Tian, you've got a parcel." Tian Nanjun was a bit puzzled. She had no relatives or friends and she had retired early. Her children were both in the same city. Who would send her a parcel? She wanted to ask, but the young man was in a hurry. He swiftly wrote something on the parcel, tore it off with a shush sound, and squeezed the parcel into the bulging cloth bag in Tian Nanjun's left hand. On the way home, Tian Nanjun thought about who the sender could be and what could be in the parcel. But when she got home, the questions were quickly thrown to the back of her mind due to busyness. After hastily finishing lunch, old Zhao went to the neighbor's house to play chess with his hands behind his back, and Tian Nanjun tied on an apron and started getting busy for the family feast. She was busy until 6 in the evening when guests started arriving and hot dishes began to be served. Everyone praised Tian Nanjun's culinary skills, but no one waited for her to sit down together. By the time the last soup was cooked, more than half of the food was already in people's stomachs with their drinks, and the rest was scattered on the dining table. This so-called family banquet seemed to be the same with or without her. There was no place for Tian Nanjun at the round table, and old Zhao didn't leave any food for her either. He was drunkenly boasting to his son-in-law. "The taste of the braised pork and soy sauce is just right. You know, if it weren't for me being promoted to head teacher back then, I would have quit and become the top chef in the province." Tian Nanjun stopped untying her apron. Old Zhao had unfairly taken her position all those years ago, and he dared to boast like this. The messy table and the smug boasts after getting drunk turned Tian Nanjun's stomach. She re-tied her apron and retreated to the kitchen. Her daughter, Zhao Zhaolu, followed her in. Zhao Zhaolu, pregnant, handed Tian Nanjun a plate full of food. "Mom, I saved you some food. Eat it while it's hot." Tian Nanjun wasn't hungry, but ever since Zhao Zhaolu became pregnant, her hormones had been out of whack and she would burst into tears at the slightest injustice. This made Tian Nanjun feel obligated to accept. But there came the sound of crying from across the room. Tian Nanjun sighed, guessing that Zhao Zhaolu had thought of the matter old Zhao had brought up for no reason a few days ago. As expected. "Mom, did you give up your plan to teach in the countryside after my brother got better because you found out you were pregnant with me?" Since she was a child, Zhao Zhaolu knew that Tian Nanjun held a particular desire to become a rural school teacher. Tian Nanjun had her dream come true in 1982, but returned to the city 2 years later due to her father's severe illness. She got another opportunity in 1990, but was forced to give it up because of the arrival of Zhao Zhaolu. Zhao Zhaolu had felt guilty for a long time after learning this from old Zhao, and Tian Nanjun had explained it many times. She gave up the dream job of a countryside teacher, not because she was carrying her daughter. After all, it was her own choice in the end. As Tian Nanjun was swallowing her food and preparing to comfort her daughter, there came a disturbance from the dining room. Her son-in-law was drunk, thanks to old Zhao, and had vomited all over the freshly cleaned carpet. Zhao Zhaolu lost her sentimental mood. She rushed out of the kitchen to support her husband, who was on the verge of collapsing. The noise continued for a long time outside the kitchen, but then all became quiet with the sound of doors closing. When everyone had left the house, Tian Nanjun felt the oppressive feeling in her chest begin to recede. She cleaned up and washed up, then turned on the table lamp and opened a novel. But as soon as her eyes passed the first sentence, the loud noise of the TV from old Zhao's return home shattered her concentration. Tian Nanjun closed the book, her eyes lingering angrily on the table, and noticed the parcel she had received in the morning, sent by someone. Her curiosity resurfaced. She reached out for the parcel. The sender's name and address were completely unfamiliar. She opened it along the seal line and found only a 6-inch photo inside. In the photo was a young woman, wearing a misty blue scarf, standing in the sunset with a radiant smile. She looked familiar, but Tian Nanjun couldn't quite place her, only feeling a bell ringing in her mind. There were a few lines of small characters written on the back of the photo. Zhao Wangqing passed away in mid-December 2011 and left all her belongings to Tian Nanjun. Please come and collect Zhao Wangqing's belongings at the address below as soon as possible after receiving this letter. Zhao Wangqing. Tian Nanjun paused, finally remembering. This was a friend she met during her first and only time teaching in the countryside. She remembered Zhao Wangqing was younger than herself, not even 50 years old yet. Why would she suddenly pass away? And why would a friend she hasn't seen for 28 years leave her belongings to her after she passed away? Tian Nanjun stared at the photo, thinking hard about it, her memories flooding back alongside a clearer sound of bicycle bell ringing. In 1982, Tian Nanjun graduated from Normal University. She was assigned to work in the best school in the city, but soon chose to quit and teach in the countryside. Upon hearing this, her father was furious. He called Tian Nanjun into his study, first reprimanding her, then advising her, and finally asking softly, "The city has good conditions and is close to home. Why do you insist on going to the countryside to suffer?" Tian Nanjun remained silent in the face of the reprimand, only speaking up at this moment. "Dad, the city is not short of teachers. But the children in the countryside could only see the world outside the mountains through the eyes of teachers." Tian Nanjun remembered when she was young, every time she went to visit her father at the re-education through labor farm, she always saw clusters of children in the villages. These children were always covered in dust. They rolled in the mud and dust, ran in the barren fields, or sat in trees with dust-covered eyes looking at the perennially gray sky. Tian Nanjun felt sorry for these children, but couldn't express why. Until one day, her father set up a blackboard in the cowshed. The children were still dusty and huddled together. What her father could teach was just a poem. Across the 5 ridges, the waves rise in all their detail, from the mighty mass of Kongtong to the sludge in the basin. The children chanted along with their long provincial accents. The sound floated above the cowshed and fell down like rain, washing the dust from their eyes. Later I thought, the reason I felt sorry for them was that no matter how much they ran and looked out, generation after generation were trapped on the same barren land, looking up to the same gray sky. But the day you set up the blackboard in the cowshed, they were able to see a different scenery through your eyes for once. After hearing this, Tian Nanjun's father was silent for a long time before he waved his hand in agreement. So in early spring of 1982, full of anticipation, Tian Nanjun arrived in the village. By the time she arrived, it was already dark. She waited in the cold wind for a moment, a car bell ringing in the distance along with a beam of light piercing the darkness. A female voice called out, "Teacher Tian?" The person was Zhao Wangqing. She was tall and thinly dressed. Her cheeks and hands were purple from the cold wind, but she was smiling happily, apologizing to Tian Nanjun in a cheerful voice. "I'm sorry, Teacher Tian. I was told to pick you up, but I didn't know the exact time. I came here twice, but when I didn't see you, I went back." Zhao Wangqing lifted the luggage and strapped it to the bicycle seat, beckoning Tian Nanjun to sit on the bike's crossbar. Seeing Tian Nanjun didn't react, Zhao Wangqing patted her chest and assured her, "Sit, Teacher Tian, I ride very steadily." But Tian Nanjun was not worried about the stability of the bike, but was amazed at Zhao Wangqing's tolerance of the cold. She leaned over and sat on the crossbar, then the icy air from Zhao Wangqing's purple face was close at hand. "Aren't you cold?" The wind whistled as the bike moved. Zhao Wangqing's voice being broken down by the wind sounded a little blurry. "Cold, but I'm used to it." How could she be used to it? Tian Nanjun held the handlebar and took off her scarf from her neck. warmly wrapping it around Zhao Wangqing. The foggy blue scarf was wrapped around Zhao Wangqing's face with one hand, blocking the constant wind, leaving only her frosted eyes exposed. Not long after, Tian Nanjun realized retrospectively the cold that Zhao Wangqing said she was used to wasn't just brought by the howling wind. The next morning, Tian Nanjun was awakened by the noise. She wrapped her cotton-padded jacket tightly and walked out, seeing Zhao Wangqing falling to the ground crying. The slovenly middle-aged man ignored Zhao Wangqing's pleas and the people's persuasion around him. He dragged Zhao Wangqing by the leg across the frozen earth like dragging a pig to be slaughtered. When a girl grows up, she should get married. I provided for your food and education. It's time for you to show gratitude. Zhao Wangqing fell into the dirt, her palms opened and closed in despair, trying to grasp at straws to stop her soul from sliding into the abyss. My mom paid for my education. She provided for my food and drink. You worked her to death, and now you want to sell me? You're a beast. The man stopped, his face twisted as he raised his hand towards Zhao Wangqing. Tian Nanjun reacted, rushing forward and biting hard onto the man's arm. The headmaster arrived with the police to take the man away. Tian Nanjun took Zhao Wangqing into the house to treat her wounds. Wiping her tears, Zhao Wangqing blamed herself. Not long after my mother passed away, he started pressing me to drop out of school and get married. I ran away, grateful to be sheltered by the school and allowed to work for my tuition as a janitor. But he always caused a lot of trouble. And now you were injured because of me. Gently touching the bruise on Tian Nanjun's forehead, Zhao Wangqing's voice was filled with despair. I'd rather just give in to him than continue this spectacle. Maybe after I get married, there could still be a chance to continue studying. Tian Nanjun interrupted sharply. If you get married, you won't have a chance to study anymore. Once a person gives in for the first time, they will give in countless more times. It's like sinking into a quagmire bit by bit. The words from the past crossed over 30 years, becoming hoarse and sad. Tian Nanjun stood in front of the clay pot in her kitchen, finding it ridiculous. She had once advised others, but at this moment, she found herself having compromised step by step. The first compromise was when her father wanted to personally hand Tian Nanjun over to a reliable man before he died. The second was after her marriage, when she was taught that she should not live separately from her husband and had to abandon the idea of returning to the village and stay in the city to teach. The third was when old Zhao took away Tian Nanjun's position by flattering the school leaders at a banquet and propagating the argument that the practicality of a woman would greatly diminish after pregnancy. Tian Nanjun learned of this at 28 weeks pregnant. She had a huge fight with old Zhao and moved into the dormitory determined to divorce, but she ended up compromising. For the child, for not being besieged by relatives and friends, for not hearing her mother say, "Old Zhao is career-oriented. You're pregnant now, forget about work. It's a woman's duty to be a good wife and mother. The man is the backbone. If his career is good, the home will be good." The water in the pot evaporated and the fish head began to burn, bringing old Zhao into the kitchen. "What can you do? We've been married for more than 20 years, and you still can't even cook a meal properly." Tian Nanjun, who had long since become numb to obedience, suddenly found her eyes full of tears. "I didn't, just so I could cook for you." What? What did she mean? Tian Nanjun was stuck. She didn't choose to get married just to cook for a man, did she? It seemed so, and yet not entirely. She dashed out of the kitchen, running into the cold air outside. Her hands and feet were painfully frozen, yet her mind became much clearer. Suddenly, Tian Nanjun remembered that she hadn't seen Zhao Wangqing for 28 years. In the depth of winter in 1989, they had met. That year, in order to take care of her son who had acute nephritis, Tian Nanjun once again compromised, choosing to quit her job and become a full-time housewife. So when she met Zhao Wangqing, she didn't have time to ask how Zhao had managed to escape from her vicious father, or whether she had received the letters and money she had sent back. After learning about Tian Nanjun's situation, Zhao Wangqing didn't say a word and turned to leave. It was disappointment, wasn't it? So what would Zhao Wangqing, who had once turned around and left in disappointment, leave for her after her death? She suddenly wanted to know. Tian Nanjun prepared to go to the address provided in the email to collect the belongings that Zhao Wangqing had left behind. The night before her departure, her daughter-in-law, Lan Xin, called. Old Zhao picked up and put it on speaker. "Dad, Zhao Weihong and I have to work overtime this weekend. Can we send Dending over for you to take care of him for a couple of days?" Tian Nanjun poked her head out of the study. No, I'm going tomorrow. Old Zhao ignored what Tian Nanjun said, responding, Sure, send him over. Your mom is free anyway. After hanging up, Tian Nanjun came out of the study. I don't have time to take care of Dendeng. But since you promised, you take care of him when he arrives. Old Zhao frowned. I don't know how to take care of a child. It's the responsibility of the older generation to help when the younger ones are busy. You always make excuses. Any issues you have, just put them off. Besides, what could you possibly have to worry about? The complacency that Tian Nanjun had developed through numbness had been scattered by the cold wind of yesterday. She let out a rare cold laugh. Old Zhao, how is it that when you're standing on your moral high ground, you only know how to be generous with others' sacrifices? Old Zhao sensed the sarcasm in her words, but he didn't expect Tian Nanjun to react this way. He was stunned for a moment, and by the time he came to, Tian Nanjun had already gone back into her study. The rebuttal he had finally thought of was swallowed back. He also missed hearing Tian Nanjun's "I'll be out for a week" before she left. Therefore, when Tian Nanjun walked out the door with her luggage the next morning, he was utterly shocked. Where are you going? What for? You'll be gone for so many days. Who's going to cook for Dending and me? Tian Nanjun was amused by the barrage of questions. She pushed open the door, walking from the dim room into the warm rising sun, suddenly in a mood for banter. Old Zhao, we've been married for over 20 years. Can't you even cook a meal? The address in the email was as remote as the village she had laboriously arrived at in 1982. It took 2 days and 1 night on the train, and then 2 changes of bus, relaying through 17 hours of winding mountain roads. Tian Nanjun woke up in the jostling bus, her silent phone filled with hundreds of missed calls and messages. She read the anxious messages from her children. Her fingers lingered over the reply box, deleting and rewriting several times. In the end, she only left for words for Zhao Zhaolu. Take care. She switched off the phone, leaning against the window looking intently at the setting sun jumping between the mountains. The long-lost freedom without distractions made her indifferent to the worries of her family, and she didn't bother to think that maybe there were no belongings left by Zhao Wangqing ahead, but a scam designed to bait those willing to bite. At the moment, she could only think. The sun setting between the mountains was beyond her memory in its beauty. The sunset fell over the mountain range, suddenly awakening Tian Nanjun's buried memories. She rummaged through her bag to verify and found a 6-inch photo. Indeed, as she guessed, Zhao Wangqing in the photo was standing in front of a sunset that set beside the Great Wall. Tian Nanjun's memory was suddenly pulled back to a hot summer day in 1984. In 1984, a bamboo forest not far from the village was designated as a scenic spot because it was a filming location for a movie. So, throughout the summer, Tian Nanjun and Zhao Wangqing went out early and returned late, selling auspicious birds they had fashioned out of bamboo strips at the site to earn the tuition for Zhao Wangqing's final year of high school. That day, they made a lot of little birds, and the 2 of them sold from dawn to dusk. On the way back to the village, a cool breeze came from the valley. The heat was blown away, and neither of them wanted to leave, so they sat down and shared the bought glutinous rice cakes. In the flower-scented summer dusk that blew in with the breeze, Tian Nanjun called out contentedly, "The mountains are beautiful, the wind is beautiful, and especially the sunset here is the most beautiful in the world." Zhao Wangqing laughed at that. "It's the same sun every day. How come it becomes the most beautiful at this moment?" "It's the same sun, that's true. But the scenery that carries the sunset is different, and so the flavor of beauty also varies." Tian Nanjun gesticulated with enthusiasm. The sunset in the city is a touch of warmth mixed into the hurried steps. The sunset in the mountains is a call for the primal romance in the wilderness. Do you know where the sunset is the most poignant? Without waiting for Zhao Wangqing to shake her head, she continued. It's the Great Wall. The sunset at the edge of the Great Wall, isn't it like the beacon fires relit after 1,000 years? As she finished speaking, Tian Nanjun lay back on the grass. Softening her tone, she looked at Zhao Wangqing's backlit silhouette. So you see, you must study, you must pass the exam to get out of these mountains. Outside this mountain, there are countless sceneries you can't even imagine. Zhao Wangqing fell silent for a moment. But if outside the mountain is so good, why did you choose to come to this valley and be a teacher? This place is poor and isolated. What's wrong with the valley? Don't you remember, our army grew in the valleys, the people's regime came from the valleys into the tall buildings. The valleys nurtured everything the people needed. Both of them looked at each other and laughed. Tian Nanjun composed herself and then continued. I teach here because there are too few teachers in the mountain villages, and also because of the choice you just mentioned. People can all make choices, but children in the valleys rarely have the opportunity. They either rely on the heavens for food and live with the earth from birth to death, or they are treated as commodities for trading property as soon as they turn 16. I want to stay here to let the children see another world through education, to not be complacent with their lot and the will of their parents, but to have the opportunity to choose a different life. She paused, suddenly looking at Zhao Wangqing with a grave expression. So I really hope that you will not get used to the cold, but will get out of it and choose the life you truly yearn for. Her words fell lightly, but it ignited a spark in Zhao Wangqing's heart, like a firework banishing the lingering chill there. A seed was planted in Zhao Wangqing's heart along with that fleeting spark, and her eyes were suddenly filled with clear expectations and aspirations. Then, if one day I can really leave the mountains, can we go together to see the sunset at the Great Wall? A sudden break brought Tiannenjin back from her memories. Outside the window, a herd of lambs led by a dog passed by the car. Their soft bleating sounded like mockery to Tiannenjin's ears. Afterward, she hadn't managed to visit the Great Wall or see the sunset outside the burglar-proof windows. She could not stay rooted in the mountain village according to her heart's desire, could not live among the hopeful eyes of the children. Instead, she was drowned in compromise amidst a growing numb routine. Tiannenjin remembered that not long after returning to the village from the valley that day, she was recalled home by a telegram about her father's serious illness. When she went home, she thought her father's illness would soon get better, and she could soon return. But contrary to her expectations, her father was claimed by illness, and she lost all opportunities to make choices completely in a series of compromises. She never expected that life is always full of unexpected turns. But when nothing had happened yet, when she was still standing in the valley caressed by the gentle breeze, what was she thinking about? It seems she discovered a pool in the woods and decided to teach Zhao Wangqing to swim before the end of summer break. So, did Zhao Wangqing learn to swim? Did she finish high school? And where has she gone in these 28 years? Walking around the town that seemed like from the 90s, Tiannenjin asked passers-by 4 directions according to the address in the email. This urgent inquiry was like boiling water, scorching her heart from the inside. The address led to an old residential community. The door to the security room was open, and an elderly man was sitting inside, tending a fire. Comparing the sender's name, Tiannenjin asked, "Excuse me, do you know where Lu Feng lives?" The old man didn't look up. "I don't know." Tiannenjin hesitated and asked again, "Then do you know where Zhao Wangqing lives?" The hand of the old man poking the fire paused. He looked up at Tiannenjin, asking tentatively, "Are you, Teacher Tian? Why would an old man thousands of miles away know her surname and profession?" Tiannenjin stepped back half a step in alarm, but still nodded. The old man suddenly changed his indifference. "Ah, yes. Lu Fang is my granddaughter. She left me instructions before going to school. Please have a seat. I'll get someone to call her." As the old man hustled off, he missed Tiannenjin's response. He came back with a look of regret and left a sentence. "Principal Zhao was kind-hearted. She must have gone to a paradise. My condolences to you." After the old man left, Tiannenjin was stunned for a while before she realized. The principal the old man mentioned, was it? Zhao Wangqing. Tiannenjin was in a quandary for a while, but her curiosity outweighed her vigilance, and she chose to stay and wait. Soon, the old man was brought back by a red-faced girl on a bike. From still far away, the old man started waving at Tiannenjin. "This is my granddaughter, Fangni. It's a coincidence that she came down the mountain to fetch medicine for Ji Chun's grandmother." Lu Fang's hard pedaling had turned her face betrayed, but she couldn't hide her joyful expression. Her bright eyes were filled with post-frost radiance, which reminded Tiannenjin of Zhao Wangqing from 30 years ago. As the bike stopped in front of her, Tiannenjin asked subconsciously, "Are you Zhao Wangqing's daughter?" Lu Fang was taken aback, while the old man on the side hastily answered, Fangni is my granddaughter, and Principal Zhao was her teacher." A good teacher. If it weren't for Principal Zhao back then, my Fangni would have been sold to Lingu village by Gaoxing. That turtle's son. The old man's emotions ran high as he spoke, and he quieted down only after being comforted and led into the security room by Lu Fang. Lu Fang came out, smiling awkwardly at Tiannenjin. "My grandfather always gets excited when talking about this." She picked up the medicine from the basket of the bike and led Tiannenjin into the community, We rented this place after Teacher Zhao was hospitalized for convenience and taking care of her. The things she left for you are all there. Hospitalized? What was she sick with? The steps ahead faltered. Lung cancer. She kept it a secret until we discovered it and sent her to the hospital, but there was no chance of a cure already. Lung cancer. Was she in a lot of pain when she died? Although she had known of Zhao Wangqing's death, it was at this moment that Tian Nanjun truly felt the reality of death. Where is her grave? After cremation, she was buried in the hill behind the school. Teacher Zhao couldn't let go of the children or the locust trees, and burying her there was her last wish. Tian Nanjun was still full of questions, the biggest one being why Zhao Wangqing would have specifically left her belongings to her. But the reality of the word death translated into lung cancer made Tian Nanjun feel a bit lightheaded. Was Zhao Wangqing the principal? As soon as she asked, Tian Nanjun realized that it was superfluous. Lu Fang had already answered. Yes, in 1998, when my father prepared to sell me for money, all the teachers were rushing for the opportunity to return to the city. Only Teacher Zhao was willing to stay and become the principal. The two of them climbed up the stairs, falling into silence amidst the panting. Their footsteps overlapped, raising clouds of dust in the narrow light and shadows, and seeming a bit lonely and desolate in the cold air. Lu Fang, seemingly lost in some memory, suddenly spoke on her own accord. That year, my father sold me to a family in Lingu village as a child bride. The relatives who came to pick me up early in the morning, afraid that my grandfather would find out, they whipped the oxen to hurry along. Just as they were about to reach the entrance of Lingu village, Teacher Zhao, who chased us on a bike, stopped them. She had ridden a full 12 li of mountain road, taking shortcuts and going through the woods, just to chase me. It was deep winter, but she stood in front of the ox cart drenched in sweat, her disheveled hair mixed with dirt and fallen leaves. In my eyes at the time, she looked dignified like a deity who finally showed herself. She pulled out all the banknotes and valuable things from her pocket, even taking off her cotton-padded clothes and shoes, putting them all on the ox cart, all for the sake of exchanging me. I was dragged around on the ox cart, crying until I was hoarse. She was trembling with cold yet showed no sign of flinching or fear. After a long standoff, the wife of the man grabbed the cotton-padded clothes and shoes from him and returned them to us. She pocketed the money and left with the ox cart. Teacher Zhao rode me back to the village on a bike. It was dusk, the setting sun was slowly falling right in front of us. I remember, Teacher Zhao looked up at it for a long time and then suddenly asked me, Lu Fang, do you think the sunset is beautiful? I nodded as I cried, she said, but you know what? The sunset at the Great Wall is even more beautiful. It looks like beacon fires reignited after 1,000 years from a distance. I asked, what's beacon fire? Teacher Zhao laughed, she said, beacon fires, you have to see them with your own eyes to know. So you must study, you must pass the exam and leave the big mountains. Outside the mountains, there are countless sceneries you can't even imagine. As she finished speaking, Lu Fang opened the door. The small single room had a simple cabinet and an iron shelf bed. An obituary photo of Zhao Wangqing was leaning slantingly against the paper box on the bed. The black and white photograph revealed Zhao Wangqing's age and thinness due to illness, but there was no hint of decay, still radiating the same joyful demeanor as when Tian Nanjun first saw her. The box on the bed is what Teacher Zhao left for you. None of us has opened it. Lu Fang carried Tian Nanjun's luggage into the room. I have to go. I still need to rush back to school to deliver medicine to Ji Chun's grandmother. There are blankets in the cabinet, but if you're not accustomed to sleeping here, you can go find my grandfather. He knows where clean hotels are. Tian Nanjun quickly reassured, I can sleep here. Lu Fang nodded, seemingly thoughtful and wanting to say something, but after a moment of hesitation, she waved her hand and left. With the door closed, Tian Nanjun didn't immediately go to the paper box. The curiosity that has been haunting her for days was right in front of her, but she suddenly felt timid. Zhao Wangqing's cause of death, Lu Fang's narrative, entwined together in her heart, stirring up a massive whirlpool. The whirlpool mixed with Tian Nanjun's unclear emotions, causing her to stand in the musty smell for a long time before she finally gathered the strength to open the paper box. What lay quietly in the box was a misty blue scarf, a few 4 old men's heads, and a yellowed notebook. The scarf was probably the one Zhao Wangqing wore in front of the Great Wall at sunset, possibly the one Tian Nanjun sent her in 1982. The 4 old men's heads were most likely sent to Zhao Wangqing along with a letter by Tian Nanjun in 1985. Finally, she opened the notebook. which recorded what she urgently wanted to know about the course of Zhao Wangqing's life over the past 28 years. But the story didn't start in 1984, it started in 1989 when Zhao Wangqing learned about Tian Nanjun's situation, then turned around and left without saying a word. When Zhao Wangqing received her correspondence university degree, she received a reply from the principal who had taken her in. In 1984, she had to run away in a hurry because of her father's coercion, and she dared not write back for fear of exposing her location. After no news for 5 years, Zhao Wangqing thought the principal would blame her, but the first sentence of the letter was a warm congratulations. The letter was lengthy. First, it talked about how the development of the scenic area in the village had facilitated various industries to pay more attention to education. Then it mentioned Zhao Wangqing's father made a lot of money as a dishonest guide but drowned in the river while celebrating with drinks. Zhao Wangqing quickly skimmed through the small print, seeking any information about Tian Nanjun. Tian Nanjun's name was at the end of the letter, which said she had left the village 5 years ago and had never returned, except for a letter she sent back in 1985 intended for Zhao Wangqing. The letter was carefully kept by the principal for several years and finally reached Zhao Wangqing with a reply. In the letter, there were several 4 old men's heads and some extremely thin letter paper. The first 3 sentences of the letter explained that Tian Nanjun didn't return to the village because her father was critically ill, and the last 3 sentences repeatedly advised Zhao Wangqing to read and pass exams to leave the mountain. The 6 lines written hastily presented a sketch at the end of the letter. The blurred ink seemed to depict a turtle standing in the sea, looking up at the moon. A code only the 2 of them could understand. Seeing this, Zhao Wangqing's eyes welled up with tears as feelings of longing overwhelmed her, falling like a downpour. The next day, Zhao Wangqing set off for the address left on Tian Nanjun's envelope. She was carrying large and small bags of local products for Tian Nanjun, the only personal items being the misty blue scarf around her neck and her nervous heart. She had so much to say to Tian Nanjun, but she was afraid that Tian Nanjun might have moved from the original address, and that the upcoming reunion might once again drift away like a dream. Perhaps fear is an omen. The person who lived at the address was a strange woman. The woman was so thin that she had a sickly appearance, but her brows and eyes somewhat resembled Tian Nanjun. "Who are you? What do you want with her?" The woman's words hinted that she knew Tian Nanjun, which reignited the hope in Zhao Wangqing's heart that had been extinguished. She carefully chose her words. "I'm teacher Tian's student. I was passing by and wanted to visit her." "Has she moved?" "Oh, she moved a long time ago. She couldn't still be living at her parents' house after she got married." "Wait a moment, I'll write the address for you." "Married?" But Tian Nanjun didn't intend to get married. She remembered Tian Nanjun had said with laughter but a definite assertiveness in her tone, "Does a woman have to have a reason to remain single? Isn't 'I don't want to get married' convincing enough?" With that phrase comforting her during the journey to Tian Nanjun's residence, Zhao Wangqing thought that marriage wasn't scary as long as entering it wasn't a compromise. As long as the life within the walls wouldn't erode the sparkling light in Tian Nanjun's eyes, it would be fine. Tian Nanjun returned home late at night. She looked pale, her eyes dim and filled with fatigue and numbness, carrying a bag, holding her 6 son. Old Zhao was striding ahead with empty hands, even turning around impatiently to hasten and complain. The comfort in Zhao Wangqing's heart crumbled to pieces. She stood up, her voice filled with repressed anger. "Tian Nanjun." Tian Nanjun was startled. She looked over in a panic, and her eyes paused for a moment. A trace of surprise burst out amidst the fatigue and numbness. "Zhao Wangqing. Zhao Wangqing, is that you? What are you doing here?" The sound of old Zhao stomping his feet in annoyance rudely interrupted Zhao Wangqing's response. Tian Nanjun recollected herself. "Old Zhao, this is Zhao Wangqing. I met her when I was teaching in 82. Old Zhao casually nodded and turned back to leave, but realized that Tian Nanjun was not following him. "Let's go. What are you standing around for? Hurry back. You have to iron the suit tonight. I need to wear it for a meeting at 6 o'clock in the morning." Zhao Wangqing frowned. "Don't you have hands? Can't you iron it yourself?" Old Zhao was taken aback. "What did you say?" "You, say that again?" Tian Nanjun intervened in a peacemaking tone, passing their son to old Zhao. "I'll iron the suit when I get back. You go to bed with our son first. I'll be back soon." After a few soft words of persuasion, old Zhao left muttering complaints under his breath. Zhao Wangqing took a deep breath, suppressing the annoyance and rising grievances in her heart. Why do you have to iron his clothes? The joy that had been restored on Tian Nanjun's face froze like a mask. She sighed as if she had made a mistake. I'm not working. I'm a full-time housewife. Doing housework is expected. After all, he's the one feeding the family. In just one sentence, like a hurricane, she shattered Zhao Wangqing's anticipation completely. You give up the chance to go back to the village and work, to cater to such a man. Is it because you compromise for this life? The one who kept telling Zhao Wangqing to follow her heart, Tian Nanjun, chose to be a man's appendage, to be trapped in the kitchen, to give up her name for the title given after being stripped of freedom. Tian Nanjun felt both annoyed and helpless due to the accusation in the words. I did not compromise, it's my willing choice. No servitude exists between husband and wife, it's common for men to work outside and women at home. Everyone is living this way, only by working together can we maintain the balance of the family, only then can we feel happy, everyone is. Everyone is like this, but what about you? Are you happy? I am, of course I am happy. It's my own choice, how can I not be happy? Zhao Wangqing couldn't bear to listen anymore. She left the local products behind and turned to leave. She quickly walked in the cold air. Tears streaming down her face felt as if they were freezing. She wandered around the unfamiliar city and ended up back under Tian Nanjun's residence. The orange light from the window upstairs indicated someone was busy moving behind the curtains. Perhaps Tian Nanjun truly accepted her situation willingly. Perhaps she truly felt happy. But the memories left from 1984 made it impossible for Zhao Wangqing to convince herself of this, no matter how hard she tried. In 1984, the night before Tian Nanjun received the telegram, she was still teaching Zhao Wangqing to swim in the forest pond as usual. Zhao Wangqing was distracted, choked on water several times, and clumsily crawled ashore. My father came to me again today. He not only asked for money, but also brought up the matter of me marrying Idioter again. He said that the latter is eager to get married and is offering a lot of dowry. After hearing this many times, Tian Nanjun was no longer angry. She quipped, Your father is like a seagull circling over the beach, and you're like a baby turtle rushing towards the sea. Ah? What do you mean? Tian Nanjun swam to the shore. Well, it's from a documentary I watched about baby turtles. After hatching on the beach, baby turtles will instinctively rush towards the sea. But the path is long and they're vulnerable, with seagulls looking for food in the sky and the scorching sun. Despite all the difficulties, the desire to wander in the sea overrides everything else, prompting the baby turtles to simply run in a head-down manner, ignoring all obstacles and running towards the blue sea in the distance. They keep running and running. Zhao Wangqing laughed and interrupted. Running continuously would only mean running from daylight to darkness. Isn't it good when it's dark? There is the moon when it's dark. Tian Nanjun scooped up the moon's reflection in her hand. When they reach the end of the beach and are swept into the sea by the waves, the baby turtles will raise their heads and look at the moon on the horizon, and then sigh, it's so beautiful. She suddenly threw the water containing fragments of the moon at Zhao Wangqing. Zhao Wangqing dodged and laughed, vowed to retaliate, but saw Tian Nanjun dive underwater. The ripples spreading on the water surface wrapped around the moonlight, making Zhao Wangqing's heart soft like melted snow. She hung down her fingers and lightly tapped on the water surface. But what if, after overcoming all difficulties to enter the sea, a baby turtle wants to go back to the beach? Tian Nanjun emerged from the water. Why? Because she wants all the baby turtles on the beach to be able to see the moon. Really? Tian Nanjun's eyes sparkled as she looked over. Then she is a very brave turtle. However, before becoming a brave turtle, she must go to the sea once. Only after seeing the sea and having a variety of opportunities to choose, will she know where she wants to go, whether it's ahead or behind. Zhao Wangqing's heart started pounding wildly. She did not know whether the fast heartbeat was because of that conversation or because of the astonishingly beautiful eyes of Tian Nanjun which seemed to melt into the moonlight. She only felt that the seed buried in her heart was slowly growing roots under the moonlight. The next day, Zhao Wangqing came down with a fever. She took medicine and slept the entire day in a daze. In her dreams, she felt Tian Nanjun's hand on her forehead and seemed to hear words like telegram and go back to the city. The fever had subsided by the evening. When Zhao Wangqing opened her eyes, she saw the figure bringing in meals and instinctively called out, Teacher Tian, how long have I been asleep? Teacher Tian got a telegram home and there was something happened. The principal borrowed a bicycle to take her to the station. The sound echoed around the room. Zhao Wangqing reacted. She left? When will she be back? That's uncertain. But judging by her face, she seemed quite serious. I don't think she will be back anytime soon." Zhao Wangqing sat up abruptly, hastily got dressed and ran out to chase after her. Inside the house, people rushed to say, "Don't run around blindly. Your father knew that Teacher Tian and the principal were not here today, and he has been everywhere looking for you. I lied to him and said that you also went to the station." "Hey." Zhao Wangqing turned a deaf ear. She only remembered that she was the one who brought Tian Nanjun here. She should also be the one to send her off. She wanted to ask Tian Nanjun if the things in her home were serious. How long until she can come back? By having an approximate idea, she would have something to look forward to. As Zhao Wangqing ran along the dirt road for a while, she ran into her father face to face. Upon seeing her, her father's annoyed face turned into a smile. "Ah, my girl, why are you rushing back in such a hurry? Are you eager to go meet Idioter with your father?" "Hee, I thought so too. Which 19-year-old girl doesn't have springtime thoughts?" He quickly caught up and grabbed Zhao Wangqing's arm. "Killing two birds with one stone, girl. You'd get a good in-laws family, and your father would get the money to pay off his debts. Double happiness, double happiness." Zhao Wangqing was stunned. She was pulled for a while before recovering from the horror of running into her father. "Don't pull. I have money. I have money. I will give you money. Just let me go. Your few dollars ain't worth nothing. Okay, don't act too humble. If you miss this opportunity of marrying Idioter, considering the crazy way you've been acting in the village following that old woman with the last name Yan these past 2 years, forget about getting such a high bride price. No one would dare to marry you. By then, aren't you pitiful? A woman who can't get married is better off dead. Hey, you little calf, dare to kick me." Zhao Wangqing was hit and rolled onto the ground. Dust flew in the sky. The pain and cursing fell on her, pressing her to the point that she was only left with the strength to gasp. But she was still struggling. Every time she was dragged back by her legs, she would use her limbs to crawl away, teeth clenched in resistance. At this point, her father had abandoned his plan to exchange Zhao Wangqing for money. He maliciously kicked towards Zhao Wangqing's abdomen, purely out of venting, and to supplement the lost paternal dignity due to Zhao Wangqing's counterattack. Upon hearing the news, people from Idioter's family rushed over, and despite several attempts, they were unable to pull him away. A woman grew desperate. "You're sinning. If you ruin her belly and she can't bear children, she'll have to be returned. The dowry you swallowed, you'll have to vomit it back to Idioter, every single bit of it." The words had an immediate effect on Zhao Wangqing's increasingly weak cries and bloody body. The beatings didn't stop, but these words were instantaneously effective. Her father stopped the onslaught, catching his breath, bending over to wipe his sweat and conjuring up a sycophantic expression, about to speak. Zhao Wangqing struggled to turn over and seize the opportunity to throw the mud and sand she was clutching fiercely towards her father. The sand got in her father's eyes. During the resulting moment of blindness, a beast-like roar resounded. The crowd was thrown into disarray amidst the dusty haze. Zhao Wangqing, bearing the pain, pushed herself up and ran as if her life depended on it. She didn't know where to run, only continuing to move forward, hoping to shake off the seagulls circling above and the scorching sunlight that always shrouded her. The end of the dirt road led to the school. The school was no longer a sanctuary, but Zhao Wangqing remembered the misty blue scarf hanging on the dormitory wall. It was the first warmth she had felt since her mother's death. She wanted to escape, and she had to take this warmth with her. Footsteps from behind relentlessly closed in, but Zhao Wangqing clenched her teeth and rushed into the school. She took the scarf down from the wall. The dormitory door had already been shaken loose. Fear seeped through the broken wooden door, wrapping around the trembling Zhao Wangqing. Despite the heat, she was shivering in fear. With her sweaty hands, she couldn't undo the window latch, so she picked up a stool and escaped through the broken window. She was cut all over by shards of glass, but she had no time to care as the crowd was catching up. She began to run again, flying headlong into a dead end like a headless fly. The sounds of footsteps began to approach in waves. In despair, she squatted down, thinking of finding a sharp object to end it all, but just as she was squatting down, she saw the manure hole behind the house. Zhao Wangqing hid in the filth until she was nearly suffocated. Footsteps came and went, curses came and went. During the occasional silence, she vomited a few times. After what felt like a century of struggle, the footsteps and curses finally disappeared completely. Using both hands and feet, Zhao Wangqing crawled out and stood in a daze in the dim light. She began to run again. As the sky grew darker, Zhao Wangqing gradually lost sight of the road. She ran to the side of a slope and, stepping onto soft dirt, fell down and plunged into a river. The water of the river propelled Zhao Wangqing, compressing the air in her chest. Desperate, she flailed her limbs and tried hard to recall the swimming techniques that Tian Nanjun had taught her. Her flailing limbs finally broke through the waves. She let the river wash away her filth and the inescapable fate. As she emerged from the water, she saw the moon hanging in the sky. Zhao Wangqing floated on the surface of the water, all the commotion and noise falling into quietness at this moment. A cool breeze blew, carrying the fragrance of flowers with the moonlight. The wilderness was infinite, the river was flowing endlessly. It seemed to be the direction of freedom that she had finally won. Turns out that by continually moving forward, you really could see the moon. She suddenly wanted to cry, to laugh, to gaze up at the sky and shout, to declare this life that from now on would be under her control. But her lips opened and closed a few times, only able to choke out, "Tian Nanjun, the moon is really beautiful." The memories dissipated with the extinguishing of the light upstairs. In Zhao Wangqing's eyes at this moment, the pitch-black window overlapped with 2 rounds of moonlight. She did not know whether Tian Nanjun's current choices were willingly made or if she really felt happy. But the seed that Tian Nanjun planted in her heart had long sprouted, growing sturdy roots that embraced her entire heart. Zhao Wangqing wiped away her tears and decided to go to the Great Wall to watch the sunset by herself. Then, she planned to go to a poorer place than her hometown to teach, to plant an ant tree to accompany her, to enable all the baby turtles on the beach to see the moon. And on a certain day in the future, when Tian Nanjun is willing to find the path in her heart again, to give her another chance to choose. Zhao Wangqing thought perhaps there will be such a day. Tian Nanjun cried all night. The next day, she set off early in the morning, stopping intermittently along the way, asking villagers for direction, and walked to the school by dusk. The school was small but clean and tidy. The cement ground behind the main gate had a bright red national flag standing upright, and the teaching buildings and dormitories were arranged on both sides like building blocks. The overall color of the school was gray, and the evergreen Nanmachillas trees within it were particularly noticeable. In the height of winter, the tree still had abundant branches and leaves, standing tall and gracefully extending its body towards the sky by the school wall. Tian Nanjun looked up in a daze. She felt a little envious and had the urge to cry. The nan tree growing together with the school that was in front of her eyes was probably grown from the sprout transplanted from Zhao Wangqing's heart. This life-giving tree was nurtured by heart, meaning that Zhao Wangqing would always be Zhao Wangqing. But it's hard for Tian Nanjun to remain Tian Nanjun. Before her name, she was a daughter, a wife, a mother. The responsibilities brought by these identities deprived Tian Nanjun of the chance to choose and was forced to turn back from a flying moth into a crawling creature. Tian Nanjun looked at the nan tree in front of her and gave a sigh. Then she was startled by the sudden sound of a door opening. The door of the dormitory opened, and a teacher came out to pour water. Seeing Tian Nanjun standing at the school gate, the teacher walked up with curiosity. "Can I help you with anything?" The teacher's eyes swept over the misty blue scarf around Tian Nanjun's neck, and the tones suddenly mixed with a probing joy. "Ah, are you teacher Tian? Why did people thousands of miles away all recognize her?" Tian Nanjun thought it was probably because Lu Fang had mentioned her after returning to school. So she nodded, and the person in front of her became more delighted. "It's great that you could come. If you are here, we will have a mainstay." "What?" The teacher didn't hear Tian Nanjun's question. He shouted loudly, "Yang Haoqing, Teacher Tian is here. She's really here." His shout summoned everyone in the school, 3 women and 2 men, among whom Lu Fang was standing. A chorus of joy surrounded Tian Nanjun. She was dizzy and was escorted into the school. 2 male teachers discussed holding a welcome party at night and hurried to catch fish in the river. Lu Fang said happily, "Actually, I was somewhat restless yesterday and wanted to ask you to come and see the school, but recalling what Teacher Zhao had told us, I didn't ask." "Zhao Wangqing, what did she tell you?" Lu Fang replied, "Nothing much. She just let us send the photos out and asked us not to actively mention the situation of the school if you come, nor intervene in your decisions. She said if you found the path in your heart, the school would have another excellent new teacher. You know, after Teacher Zhao passed away, many teachers left. Right now, the district doesn't pay much attention to the school. Without a mainstay, it is almost in shambles. Teacher Zhao said you are highly capable and experienced. We all hoped for you to come. When you didn't bring it up yesterday, we were afraid you were unwilling." Tian Nanjun interrupted. So Zhao Wangqing deliberately left her belongings to me as bait to lure me in? No, not at all. Lu Fang became anxious, quickly explained. Teacher Zhao didn't mean that. Think about it. After the photos were sent, whether to come or not, it was your own choice, right? Teacher Zhao only knew that her days were numbered. She was not only worried about the school, but also about you. She always said that as long as people had thoughts in their hearts, they should have a chance to choose. Lu Fang cautiously watched Tian Nanjun's expression. So, do you want to stay? The answer in Tian Nanjun's heart, of course, was yes. But life can't simply depend on one's own wishes. Her daughter's stomach was getting bigger and bigger. Her son and daughter-in-law worked overtime all year round, and her grandson Deng Deng needed her care. And there was also old Zhao's heart disease. Her responsibilities as a wife and mother forced her spoken words to go against what was in her heart, but looking at the expectant faces in front of her, Tian Nanjun could not say anything to the contrary. She quickly changed the subject. Where is Zhao Wangqing's grave? Could you take me to see it? After putting her luggage into the little house by the nan tree where Zhao Wangqing lived, Tian Nanjun followed Lu Fang to the back mountain. The open countryside was open, flat and neat, offering a great view of the school down the hill. On school days, the sound of children's reading and the sight of them running and playing would show up clearly without any obstruction. It's a good place for a final rest, Tian Nanjun thought to herself, walking towards Zhao Wangqing's tomb. In front of the grave, there was already a small figure, a thin little girl who was reading a lesson aloud with focused expression. The girl had a heavy accent but read with a lot of emotion. Her little face was red from the cold. Her eyes were also shining, but she had a smile on her lips, reading every word seriously. Lu Fang began to speak softly. Reading the lesson in Mandarin was an assignment given by Teacher Zhao before she went to the hospital. She practiced day and night, hoping that Teacher Zhao would be discharged, but now she can only do it in front of the grave. As the girl finished reading, Lu Fang smiled and gave her a thumbs up. Ji-chun, you read really well. A lot of improvement. Ji-chun turned her face with a shy smile. Her gaze fell on Tian Nanjun, lingering on the misty blue scarf, and she lightly exclaimed, Isn't that Teacher Zhao's scarf? Tian Nanjun's hand followed her gaze to the scarf, hearing Lu Fang's voice in her ear. It's Teacher Zhao's. But the scarf was originally given by Teacher Tian to Teacher Zhao, so now it only counts as returning to its original owner. Ji-chun contemplated silently for a while, her eyes filled with joy. Teacher Tian? Your Teacher Zhao's teacher. She was no longer shy. The girl excitedly huddled in front of Tian Nanjun asking this and that. Ji-chun spoke quickly with a heavy accent. Lu Fang could see that Tian Nanjun was having a hard time understanding, so she spoke up to stop her. Ji-chun, your grandma is home alone with no one to take care of her. She must be trying to work hard despite her illness again. Ji-chun responded with a no as she realized what was happening. She hastily hugged her textbook and ran down the hill. Lu Fang called out from behind her, Run slowly. Remember to arrive on time for class tomorrow. Ji-chun responded, running and turning around to wave, Teacher Tian, see you tomorrow. The childlike voice echoed in the mountains, but Tian Nanjun let out a sigh. See you tomorrow? But tomorrow she'll be boarding the return bus, waving goodbye to this school and the longing that is once again stirring in her heart. Ji-chun's figure disappeared in the bushes. A small river came into view. It seemed that the male teacher, who had hurriedly gone to catch fish, slipped on the icy river surface, his body flying up and falling heavily. Tian Nanjun felt the pain in the distance as her own. She quietly exclaimed and pointed to show Lu Fang, but Lu Fang was focused on clearing the dust on the grave. So she also withdrew her attention and looked at the portrait on the tombstone with complicated emotions. As the day turned to dusk, Tian Nanjun returned to the school with Lu Fang. When they were eating grilled fish in the canteen, she learned that the man who had slipped in the afternoon was Yang Haoqing. He had hurt his tailbone and couldn't eat. He had gone into the dormitory early. Tian Nanjun suggested taking Yang Haoqing to the hospital, but he insisted that he was fine. After finishing the grilled fish and cleaning the plates, Yang Haoqing had reached his limit of enduring the pain. Lu Fang rode a bike to the street and called a minivan and took Yang Haoqing to the hospital. Tian Nanjun felt guilty. After all, Yang Haoqing was injured trying to catch fish for her. She didn't dare to sleep, flipping through a novel, sitting in front of the window, waiting for Lu Fang to return to ask about Yang Haoqing's situation. Her eyes stayed on the novel, but her mind couldn't remember a single word. The shadow of the Nantry was cast on the table, and Tian Nanjun couldn't help but think that Zhao Wangqing had spent more than 20 years among these shadows. So, how many children's eyes had she seen, and how many little turtles stranded on the beach had she let roam into the ocean, looking up at the moon? The path in Tian Nanjun's heart overlapped with Zhao Wangqing's, but the seed in her heart planted by her father had stopped growing because of him. No, it's not fair to say that. All in all, everything was her choice. Whether it was from being soft-hearted, being pressured, or compromising, the ultimate right to choose was always in her hands. Whether it was in the past or now. In the silence, there was a knock at the door. When the door opened, it was Lu Fang. "Teacher Tian, you're still not asleep." "Ah, that is, Yang Haoqing got a severe fall, and he might not be able to come back for a while." "Well, we have too few teachers now, and the classes are all full. If he doesn't come, the classes he's teaching will have to be suspended." "Well, that is..." Lu Fang looked up, her eyes full of expectation. "Could you stay and cover his classes for a few days?" Tian Nanjun agreed without much hesitation. 1. It was a matter of urgency. 2. She felt somewhat guilty. But most importantly, she was looking forward to standing behind the lectern again. Tian Nanjun didn't sleep all night. She browsed through the teaching plans left by Yang Haoqing, familiarized herself with the textbooks, and marked the key points, treating the Nantry outside the window as a student and rehearsing her lessons in advance. The excitement in her heart kept growing, but it was replaced with nervousness the next day. Tian Nanjun nervously entered the classroom, and before she could even stand still, she heard a childlike voice calling her, "Teacher Tian." Ji Chun's ruddy smiling face was squeezed in the crowd of children. She waved naturally at Tian Nanjun and proudly answered the chirping questions from around her. "That's Teacher Tian. Teacher Tian is amazing. She's Teacher Zhao's teacher." With these words, the eyes looking at Tian Nanjun turned into bright stars. These eyes, washed by the rain, had appeared countless times in Tian Nanjun's dreams. She suddenly felt a tightness in her nose and an incredible sense of unreality. The students quieted down, stood up obediently under Ji Chun's lead, and bowed. "Hello, teacher." The tender voices softly touched her heart. Wiping tears from her eyes, she said, "Hello, students." The feeling of unreality and nervousness was wiped away. At this moment, Tian Nanjun only felt a gentle breeze blowing in her heart. Back in her dorm at night, Tian Nanjun turned on her phone and edited a series of events, from receiving the photos to agreeing to substitute the class, into a text message and sent it to her daughter Zhao Zhaolu. The text ended with the words, "All is well, we'll be home before the new year." The responsibility that Tian Nanjun couldn't let go of was ultimately greater than her own hopes, so even if she was reluctant, she would still leave. But at least, she thought, in the short time of substitute teaching, she could just be Teacher Tian, not a criticized wife or a demanded mother. Ji Chun hadn't come to school for several days. The students in her class said that it was because her grandma suddenly fell ill. Tian Nanjun was worried for several days. After the busy end-of-term exams ended, she went to visit the village with Lu Fang. The old woman lay in a cramped house, medications piled up by the bed, and a cup of hot water steaming on the side. Lu Fang quickly found another glass and cooled down the hot water by pouring it back and forth, before helping the old woman to take her medication. After taking the medicine, the two of them started talking in a dialect that Tian Nanjun couldn't understand. She stood by them for a while before quietly leaving to find Ji Chun. Ji Chun was standing in front of the stove, stirring the pot with a spatula, sweating profusely while still reciting poems. Her accent was as heavy as ever, but she recited the poems without missing a single word, and Tian Nanjun couldn't help but compliment her. The sound startled Ji Chun. When she turned her head and saw it was Tian Nanjun, she revealed a shy smile. Tian Nanjun stepped forward to help, but when she saw the food in the pot, she couldn't help but be shocked. "Is this what you and your grandma eat?" Ji Chun quickly waved her hands. No, we can't eat something this good. This is for Zhao Hua." The food was poured into a bucket and taken to the pig pen in the corner of the yard. Ji Chun skillfully called Hu Hu while pouring the food into the trough. Zhao Hua, dragging her huge body, plodded over. Ji Chun happily patted the pig's head, telling Tian Nanjun, "Grandma said it doesn't matter if we eat less, but Zhao Hua must eat well. She needs to be fat and healthy to fetch a good price. With the money, we can treat Grandma's illness and buy 2 more piglets. When the piglets grow up and are sold, we can buy 3 more, and then I'll have enough money for university tuition." Hey, if I can get into university, that is." Tian Nanjun was infected by Ji Chun's smile. She asked, "What kind of university do you want to go to?" "Well, I want to go to a university where I can become a doctor. That way I can cure grandma's illness." As Zhao Hua, having finished eating, waddled away, Ji Chun looked at Tian Nanjun. "Teacher Tian, have you assigned homework these days? Did the school have exams? Can you explain the background of night mooring at Maple Bridge to me?" The expectation for the future in Ji Chun's words and the cautious request in her eyes made Tian Nanjun impulsively say, "I can't today. But when I come to give you tutoring tomorrow, I can." Ji Chun was despondent for 2 seconds. When she understood the implications in Tian Nanjun's words, the smile on her face suddenly bloomed like the flowers of early spring. There was a sound from inside the house. Grandma was calling for Ji Chun. Ji Chun hurriedly replied, and then suddenly ran close to give Tian Nanjun a hug around her waist. As she ran into the house, she was still excited and her face was flushed red. "Teacher Tian, see you tomorrow." Back at school at night, the teachers bought a few bottles of wine, preparing to have a farewell dinner before going to the district for training. Tian Nanjun had a couple bites and then slipped out back to call her family. Her daughter's phone line was busy. When she called her son and mentioned that she wouldn't be home for the new year, he immediately criticized her from the other end. "Dad was hospitalized with a heart condition, and you didn't care. Langson and I have to work overtime every day and there's no one to take care of Dengdeng, but you never asked. Are you that selfish, only thinking about yourself? Neglecting everything at home for some tutoring? Can't you prioritize properly?" Tian Nanjun was reprimanded by her son till she was red in the face. She wanted to argue, to ask questions, but before she could, she heard her daughter's voice from the other side. "Zhao Weiheng, stop pretending here. Is Mom your son or your grandson that you can scold her like this? You put on this act when you want money and property, but when Mom can't assist you a little, you turn into an ungrateful wretch." There was a fierce argument on the other side. Tian Nanjun anxiously tried to mediate. She helplessly thought, fine, just betray Ji Chun's expectations and her own dreams and go home. But after the argument, her daughter spoke clearly again. "Mom, are you there? You listen, Zhao Weiheng is my brother, but he's not kind. Don't take his words to heart. You just follow your own wishes. Stay wherever you want to stay as long as you want. Don't give up your own life for anyone. Mom, you really can't prioritize properly, but not in the way Zhao Weiheng says. You always take on responsibilities that you shouldn't, treating them more heavily than your own life." The phone call ended, and Tian Nanjun stood frozen for a moment, and then she suddenly felt incredibly light. In the bitter cold, she seemed to feel once again the cool breeze that had dissipated the heat around her in the valley in 1984. Outside the house, the moonlight was bright, and the teachers were still drinking and chatting. Tian Nanjun sat back at the table and listened to Lu Fang laughingly recount funny stories about Zhao Wangqing. Although Zhao Wangqing remained unmarried her whole life, she was not without suitors, especially around the millennium. She was pursued fiercely by a volunteer teacher. The teacher was tall, handsome, and proactive, showing his affection for Zhao Wangqing frequently, but was constantly rejected. Finally, unable to stand it, he cornered Zhao Wangqing during the Mid-Autumn Festival and asked, "What's wrong with me? Tell me, I'll change." Zhao Wangqing probably felt helpless, and the usually calm Zhao Wangqing responded in an incoherent way. "It's not that you're not good, it's just that the moon is too beautiful." Imagining the disheveled look of the volunteer teacher in the wind 12 years ago, the teachers all laughed. Tian Nanjun couldn't help but join in the laughter. She took a drink and prepared to return to her dorm to prepare lessons. But when she got under the nan tree, she saw the moonlight filtering through the branches and forming a bright, clear spring on the ground. Tian Nanjun stopped and looked at the dreamy, surreal jade plate hanging in the sky. Maybe she should go home and continue to shoulder the responsibility of being a wife and mother without complaining, but the moon is too beautiful. The tutoring started as scheduled, but rarely went smoothly. Every early morning, Tian Nanjun would arrive at Ji Chun's house. First, she would roll up her sleeves to feed the chickens and ducks and mix food for pigs. Then she would carry water and chop firewood, wash Ji Chun's grandmother's body, and mix water to feed her medicine. Only after finishing all that would they begin to study. Ji Chun was smart, catching on quickly, and was very good at applying what she learned. Tian Nanjun was pleased and thought that such a good seedling, even in such a poor learning environment, had a good chance of getting into university and becoming a doctor as she wished. So Tian Nanjun often encouraged Ji Chun and would talk about the scenery outside the mountains. like the cherry blossoms that cover the streets, the bridges that span the Yangtze River, and the tracks that pass through buildings. Ji-chun loved to hear these stories. Every time she listened, her eyes twinkled brightly, full of impatient anticipation for the future. During the new year, Ji-chun's grandmother improved and could get out of bed and move around, and also lean against the back of the bed to do some sewing. At noon, they made dumplings, and even the food for Jiahua had cornmeal mixed in. After midnight, Ji-chun used Tiannanzhen's phone to talk to her mother, who was far away in Guangzhou. To the sound of fireworks ringing out in the village, Ji-chun covered her ears and yelled into the phone against the background sound of children crying, "Mom, Happy New Year." The new year was lively and promising. It seemed that everything was moving in a positive direction. Unexpectedly, not long after the new year, Ji-chun's grandmother passed away after an accidental fall. Before Ji-chun's grandmother died, perhaps due to an upturn in her condition, she grew stronger by the day, even embroidering 2 pairs of insoles for Tiannanzhen as a thank you gift. When Ji-chun brought the insoles, Tiannanzhen was packing up her luggage for the return trip. Ji-chun paused. "Teacher Tian, are you leaving?" "Ah, yes, my daughter is about to give birth, and I need to go back to be with her." "Then, will you come back later?" Tiannanzhen fell silent. Life was full of uncertainties, and whether she could come back was not something she could decide. Ji-chun understood the meaning of her silence. Her eyes reddened, her voice tinged with regret. "It's such a pity. If you could stay a few more days, you could see the peach blossoms blooming on the mountain behind." Tears rolled down, which Ji-chun quickly wiped away. She lowered her head and handed over 2 pairs of insoles, on which were stitched clusters of tender pink peach blossoms. The stitches were barely visible. Ji-chun, still a child, had reddened eyes but managed to conceal her concealed loss with a mature smile. "They were embroidered by my grandma. She wanted to thank you for helping our family with chores and tutoring me. The peach blossoms are a good omen. Having them under your feet will bring smooth sailing." Tiannanzhen's heart ached for Ji-chun. She opened her arms to embrace the child in front of her, but she heard a commotion from the courtyard. A boy's voice eagerly called Ji-chun's name. As Ji-chun responded and walked toward the door, she heard the boy shout before she could open it. "Ji-chun, my mom said, your grandma is gone." On the 3rd day after Ji-chun's grandmother's death, Ji-chun's mother hurried from Guangzhou with her son. The frail and exhausted woman had her left hand amputated at the wrist. The woman sold Jiahua to finance the funeral. From beginning to end, she didn't shed a tear, and there was no expression on her face. She was numb the whole time until Tiannanzhen asked about Ji-chun's whereabouts. Then she became a little embarrassed. During the few days of the funeral, Tiannanzhen's bustling help had probably eased the woman's weariness. The woman looked at Ji-chun, who was calming down her crying and incessant son, and began to speak. She had given birth to Ji-chun when she had been tricked at a young age. Then she went to work in Guangzhou and worked 21 hours on end at a factory, even once sticking her hand into a machine out of exhaustion. After the disability, she was devastated, and her current husband was the one who saved her. Her husband was an honest and mild-natured man, but not very capable. He just worked on construction sites with cement. The family of 3 was squeezed into less than 15 square meters of rooms. Chun is still young and she can't stay in the village alone. But if she goes to Guangzhou with me, I am afraid she cannot attend school. The woman sighed. I will try to find a part-time job and try my best to support her through junior high school and then vocational school. I heard that beauty salons train quickly and earn good money, so she can be independent and also help support her younger brother. Tiannanzhen couldn't help but want to say that Ji-chun's dream was to become a doctor. But the near despair in the woman's eyes made Tiannanzhen silent. When the woman took Ji-chun away, Tiannanzhen sent them off with her bicycle, and couldn't help but look at Ji-chun's small figure. She is still a sprouting bud, Tiannanzhen thought. If a bud is guided by the sun, it will grow into a tree, but if it experiences hardship too early, it can show signs of fatigue and wilt prematurely. The bus took Ji-chun away, and the exhaust smoke dissipated in the dust raised by the wheels, making Tiannanzhen feel her heart was stifling. Being a hairdresser was indeed a way to survive. But if Ji-chun's wish was to hold a scalpel, why should she be forced to hold a pair of hairdressing scissors instead? Tiannanzhen stood holding her bicycle, but her feet felt like they had taken root. Ji-chun shouldn't have left, she should have stayed here. Even if the educational resources here are not as good as those in the city, it can still give her an opportunity to go to university and realize her dreams. Even if the woman can't afford to support her due to poverty, as long as Ji-chun continues to study here, Tian Nanjun can sponsor Ji-chun with her retirement pension. The problem is that Ji-chun is young and needs an adult to act as a guardian if she stays here. Tian Nanjun was a bit disheartened. If she could guarantee to come back after her daughter gave birth, it would be great. But why couldn't she guarantee to come back? The reason she wanted to tell Ji-chun before was that life is full of uncertainties. Life is indeed full of uncertainties, but so what? The choice in Tian Nanjun's life has always been in her hands. She is entitled and has the power to determine where she stays, the direction of the second half of her life. So, after her daughter gives birth, Tian Nanjun can return to school as a formal teacher. She could also catch up with the departing bus and persuade the woman to let Ji-chun stay here to study. She could stay here to grow towards the sun and realize her dream of becoming a doctor. Tian Nanjun rode her bike and chased in the direction the bus had left. Between the shaky scenery, she seemed to see Zhao Wangqing, who was 10 years ago, walking through the woods and soaking with sweat, trying to change Lu Feng's fate. The path in Tian Nanjun's heart finally coincided with Zhao Wangqing's. She stood up and rode her bike with determination, the wind hitting her cheeks, and she felt an unprecedented sense of liberation and freedom. The bus Ji-chun was on didn't go far before it stopped with a black smoke coming out. The driver apologized, saying another bus would arrive shortly, and the passengers had to reluctantly get off the bus with their luggage. Ji-chun's mother had to leave Ji-chun with the luggage and take her son, who was crying for the candy in the shop by the roadside. Ji-chun sat on the rock next to the luggage, her eyes lingering on the direction where the bus had left, looking at the tombs of her grandmother that she could no longer see in the distant mountains. Suddenly, a bit of pink caught her eye. She walked over curiously and was surprised to find it was a peach blossom. She remembered her grandmother once told her that the peach blossoms in lower altitude bloomed earlier than those on the mountain. The pink petals filled Ji-chun with joy. Forgetting her luggage and her mother, she labored to pluck the peach blossom and planned to run back to the village to show the blooming pink to Tian Nanjun before she left. She didn't know that peach blossoms were common in the city. She only knew that these blooming peach blossoms were something that teacher Tian regretted not being able to see before leaving. Holding the peach blossoms, Ji-chun ran back the way she came. After a short while, she saw Tian Nanjun cycling towards her from afar. Ji-chun couldn't believe it. She stood still, rubbed her eyes for a clearer look, and only when she confirmed that it was Tian Nanjun on the bike, she jumped up excitedly, raised the peach blossom in her hand high and called out to Tian Nanjun, "The flowers have bloomed. Teacher Tian, look, the flowers have bloomed. They've really bloomed."